Well, welcome back to a chat with Anita and Matt. We've got some great stuff today. We're going to be talking about urgency and using this tactic in your marketing to make sales. So specifically, we're talking about false urgency. And false urgency is where you'll have something like a timer at the end of a webinar and say there's only, 15 minutes left. After this time, we're going to shut this down. You can't purchase this product for this price. This is your last chance. You got to get it now. The reason why it's called false urgency is because there's no reason that it has to actually be like that. You can probably sell the course or whatever it is you're selling the next day for the same price. It's been artificially placed in there to put pressure on people to make a decision to buy. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Matt, having his psychology background, is actually going to talk about why this doesn't really work. And some of you are going to be like, what? It works totally fine. Well, we're going to talk about that. So I'm going to let Matt lead in and take it from here.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what you mean by work. It does have an outcome. It just is not usually the outcome that you'd really want it to be as an entrepreneur, as a small business owner. And you're right, urgency is used everywhere, right? Turn on your TV, any commercial, any advertisement's been used, as long as marketing has been around, this sense of urgency, must buy now. The problem, I think, is when we bring this into the entrepreneurial world. It's different if you're watching, something that's, sell on TV or made on
seen on TV.
Yeah, seen on TV, right? Like, the timer's clicking down on QVC or something. Well, it's different if it's like kind of an organization, but when you bring it to the personal level, that it's you trying to sell to somebody else, because it's one-on-one selling, even if there's lots of folks in your audience, it's not appropriate the way that a lot of the gurus have been teaching it. We've talked about urgency before as one of those dark psychology tactics that come from those studies done years ago. No time to talk about the history of all that, but just to point out to folks that there are alternatives to the high pressure urgency. Not only what you said, Anita, about the timers and things, but just the frantic nature of the emails, because you're like, this is how it's done. Your card is open, and now you just got to keep hammering people with emails. You make the subject headings more and more frantic. Yeah. We're all onto this game, and this is why it's just starting to fail. Well, it has been failing for a while now, as most of these tactics have been.
Yeah, I think it's, you say failing and people would say, yeah, but you know what, I make my most money when I've done product launches or when I've run webinars in those 15 minutes when I have that countdown going on, or in the last hour before cart close. And for me, the fail, if you will, or that it doesn't work, I'm going to share a story, my personal story around when I've actually gone ahead and bought into this false urgency, was scared of missing out. So there was one particular webinar that I was on, and it was all hype. I had no idea. I think I've spoken about this actually in one of our earlier chats, where it was just hypey. It was exciting, press number 1 if you agree. And there's like ones across the screen, like just crazy stuff like this. But I didn't know that I had entered this world. I got caught up in the emotions. It was exciting. They were talking in these, quick voices, and they were loud. And it was like, okay. And at the end, it was like, you can only get this in the next 15 minutes, all of that stuff. I remember getting my credit card, and I was nervous because it kind of felt like, well, I don't know if this is for me, but I was also scared to miss out. I was like, well, what happens if this is the only chance I have? I tried to do some research on this guy who was selling this product, and there was hardly anything available. His website was really questionable, and he had a couple YouTube videos. That was it. There was really nothing much else about this guy anywhere on the internet. So I was like, I don't know. 10 minutes left. Are there any questions? And he's answering questions. You see this big clock on there and the time's ticking away. I'm getting more anxious, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do it. So I put my credit card number in. I bought the course. Now, it turned out that this course was helpful for me in many ways, but what happens if it wasn't? Then what? Well, now you're left with a situation, and I think a lot of people feel this way. They get caught up in the excitement because of the urgency, but then afterwards they kind of go, oh, you know what? Maybe I really didn't want this. Or, maybe this isn't really for me. Now, I'm a fairly assertive person. I don't mind asking for refunds, but there are a lot of people who aren't comfortable with doing that because they feel like they've made the mistake. They might not want to, email support and say, hey, listen, I've changed my mind. So they just go off. They never consume the product, but yet the money has gone to that, business or guru's pocket. And then you're just left with this, crappy feeling afterwards of regret because you bought into the urgency and it just totally took you out of any rational thought about whether this product or service actually would be good for you.
Yeah. And, key to me and what really got me started on this topic was the stat that was given to me by two different people that marketed funnels for some gurus. And I would not have believed it if I hadn't heard the same thing from two different sources, but they told me the same stat. That is 75% of people who bought within the last hour of their cart closing wanted their money back within 30 days.
Yep.
75%. Now, again, I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't heard them, but say it wasn't even half of that or a third of it. Still, if 25% of your people who you use this urgency tactic on now want their money back, that is a lot of buyer's remorse, a lot of hurt feelings, a lot of uncomfortable situations. Why would you put yourself in that position? But that's not what the gurus say. Like you just said before, you have to send that email the last hour before your cart closes because that's when you get all your sales. Well, what's your outcome? What's your metric here? Is it just to nail those sales in the last hour? Or is it to get customers that are going to like what you do and stay with you? If you're selling 100 of your product in that last hour and 75% want their money back, or even a third of that, say on the low side, 25%, is that really a win? And I think not. I think that really far offsets any sales. So I think in the guru's mind, when they say, yeah, this works, it's a short term. It's a short term, less than 30-day win with a lot of bad on the other side.
Yeah. What's really interesting is I was just thinking back as you were talking, every time I was on, and I think they were all webinars where I was pressured in the end and that false urgency was used, I would buy them. I would buy the courses. I would go through them. And you know what? I don't follow those people at all anymore. None of them. Every single one of them, I have not purchased a second product from, and I've unsubscribed from their lists because that is not who I am. And the bigger thing, like you touched on this, and that the bigger thing for me is that, yeah, that's a great short-term tactic if you're just talking gross sales. Yeah, it works. There's no doubt about it. I mean, how many courses have I bought into because of that false urgency that was used? But what about if you have a different outcome, like you said, long term? Well, if that is how I'm starting relationships with people is by using this manipulative tactic, it doesn't bode well for a long-term relationship. Right off, it's kind of like going on a first date with somebody and they lie to you right out of the gate. So you might feel good as you leave because you think, oh, that went well. But, like you said, 30 days or whatever it might be, a day or two later, you're thinking, I don't think that went quite as well as I thought I did.
And your date says the same thing. Your date says, I had to lie to you because I needed to get a yes from you because it's in your best interest to have, done what I said. So I had to lie just to kind of nudge you over.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know what I mean? This is so tough for people coming into the online world because in a sense, yes, we know urgency works short term, But long term, it's very injurious to these relationships. And I mean, N equals 1 here that I have moved away from all of those people. I've never bought again from them. I've unsubscribed from their list, but I suspect I'm not the only one. I think there's a lot of people. Yeah. Okay. So N equals 2. We got 2 of us on here who have done that. And I'm sure there's people watching this who are going to comment, that they also have had the same thing. I am in this business to help people. And by helping people, I want to build the strongest relationship I can with them right from the start. And that is, I think, the key difference between these gurus who are talking, 7-figure launches and all of that, versus my launches will never be that big. That's totally fine. But if I have a core group of people who continue to follow me for years, that's much more important to me than, how much money I made in the last hour before my cart closed.
Yeah. And maybe that's an exercise those watching this could do. I just did it in my head while you were talking, and you're right. I'm thinking back to those people whose products I use now that I continue to use, and I continue to support them. I'm still on their list. I'm still opening all their emails. When I think back, none of them sold me on urgency. And the ones that did, and I can think, like you, I've bought just about it, every platform and product out there at some point. I follow none of them. A lot of them, I'm still on their list because it just goes into a spam folder. But yeah, I think I'm about 100% now following and staying focused. And that's what we've been talking about. My motto is keep your customers forever. And that's what we're looking for, is long-term relationships. And isn't that funny that between the 2 of us, we can't think of anybody who used urgency on us that we're still with. And maybe those watching, you can look at your own people that you're following now. Is that true for you? Is there anybody that you bought something from that used heavy urgency on you that you still watch? And if that's not the case for you, well, it's probably not going to be the case for your audience. So why rely so heavy on urgency just because you're told, well, you need to do this? There's a lot of stuff you're told, you need to do this, the scarcity and urgency and social proof and reciprocity and authority. We all know the tactics. Do you really need those things in such heavy doses as they've been taught?
Yeah. And there are times where you genuinely need to use something like urgency or scarcity. For instance, if you have a live event and there's only a certain number of seats available, right? Or there is some sort of real time limit. Like, let's say you're launching, version 2.0 of something, and you're selling off version 1.0 only until 2.0 is launched. That makes sense. And we're not talking anything like that. Like Matt says, a heavy dose, the huge countdown timer, this is your only chance to buy. After this webinar ends, that's it. This is gone forever. And then you discover, no, they're running the same thing a week later, just with another joint venture partner or, somewhere else. I think that was, for me, the most disappointing thing of all. I believed them when they said that this was the only opportunity. And then to feel so stupid in my, naivety that I would come on, Anita, how could you not know that these guys would just pull out this same show a week later? But I didn't. And so I felt, I hated it. I felt terrible about it. But it worked, again, because their goal was not to have a long-term customer. Their goal was to just grab the cash.
Yeah, but that's how it's taught. I've been at so many workshops and conferences and hands-on sorts of seminars, as well as on coaching calls and things. And I've heard this, a dozen times or more, that folks are, entrepreneurs are putting together some product or service, and they're like, there really isn't any urgency here. And the guru, the instructor says, well, you got to create some then, right? Is there anything about this that could be urgent, that it ends tomorrow? So it's right from the start. It's like, okay, well, there's no urgency. Well, you have to create some. Mm-hmm. And I guess my point is, no, you don't. There are so many ways of selling, and we've talked about a lot of the good psychology ways of demonstrating to people that their voice was heard, what they said made a difference, how they compare to others. There's lots of good psychology out there to teach us how to sell. You don't have to rely. A little sprinkle of urgency is okay, if appropriate, but it doesn't have to be in every recipe. You don't have to put a cup of it in every recipe. It's just the gurus, they don't know any better, because all they know are those same dark psychology tactics. And in their mind, this has worked for so long, it's going to continue to work forever. Well, nothing works forever. It worked for them during the gold rush days of internet marketing, where they just be like, buy now, you'd be crazy not to buy this. And people ripping open their wallet. And we're not there anymore. And so you have to think differently. You can't keep using the same tactics that everybody's aware of. You just look like that guy, and who wants to look like that guy?
I don't want to look like that guy. I want to look like this gal right here. But I think part of the reason why it's not working in the same way anymore is, and Matt, you're the psychologist here. You can back me up or refute what I'm saying, is that when you're constantly like fear of missing out, fear of missing out, fear of missing out, fear of missing out, every time you wind up on a webinar, that over time you don't respond to that fear anymore. It's kind of like the boy who cried wolf, right? Like, oh, it's real. Oh, no, it's not. Oh, yeah, it's real. Oh, no, it's not. Oh, yeah, it's real. No, it's not. Oh, well, it's probably not real, so I'm not even going to buy into it. Am I correct in that assessment?
Yeah, because it's just I don't. It's so ingrained now. I just did a webinar with a partner some months ago, mm-hmm. and from the webinar I was selling a master class, and I think it was about 17 or 18% of folks watching bought live. And I remember my partner saying, wow, it could have been, she's just a critique, said it could have been higher if you would have put some urgency in there. Yeah. And because I didn't. I said, this course is available and there is a discount. And, I added something else in there that was a complimentary bonus to what it was all about. But I didn't say you had to buy it by, midnight Sunday, because you did.
Yeah.
You bought it Monday or Tuesday. I urge people to sign up by Sunday, because we kind of work in cohorts. It'd be nice to start everybody on Monday, rather than kind of trickling in. But I didn't make a big deal about it. I didn't say anything about urgency, but it's just so, it's like, well, you didn't dump in the cup of urgency. That was the missing ingredient. It's like, well, 17% of people who didn't know me, who just walk in there, and there I am talking about how I can help them increase their webinar attendance. For 17% of people to get out their credit card, I thought that was pretty decent. I wouldn't trade that to get, maybe you could have got 20% if you would have given them some fake urgency.
Yeah. Well, because it's got to align with your values, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it just wasn't there. If there's no urgency and there's no scarcity, why would you fake it? But that's what what I've been told in courses I've taken, in seminars and workshops, told all the time. Well, you got to find something, because that is a key ingredient. And I think we're saying it's not the flour in your sugars. It's the nutmeg, maybe.
Yeah.
You might need it in this recipe. You might not.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was just going to say something. And then when you said the nutmeg, my mind just went off.
Started thinking about cookies and bacon.
I was actually mashed potatoes. I think I put it in just a little sprinkle, and it just adds a little bit of flavor. This genuinely, fear is a huge motivator in humans. So we're afraid of missing out. We're afraid of, being and not just missing out on, let's say, that particular thing that's being sold that minute. So on the webinar, 15 minutes, you got to buy it now. We not only have that fear, but we also have fear of those who are in our social circles. Maybe as entrepreneurs, we might be in certain groups that we want to participate as well, right? We don't want to be the only one who didn't buy whenever. It's kind of like sitting there at Christmas while everyone's opening their gifts and you're the only one who doesn't have anything to open. You don't feel a part of the community. You feel like you've missed out. you don't feel that same attachment. So I totally get why it works, especially when you're selling to a cold audience. So somebody, like you mentioned, somebody who doesn't know anything about you. But I think that is the reason why it makes more sense to me to get to know your audience before the webinar, before the sale, so that then you don't have to do that. You can actually allow them to make the decision, hey, this is for me, this is not for me right now, maybe this will never be for me, to give them that respect. And you had talked about that in one of our previous episodes, Matt. How did you remember prior to the webinar, you did a bunch of things. I just want to mention that because this is one way that is a brilliant way to overcome that, well, they don't know who I am, so I'm going to use false urgency as a way to get them to buy rather than a relationship. So do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so true. Yeah, I mean, everything going through my brain is psychology and feedback. Everything's about feedback. How do you get asked the right questions in the right way to the right people at the right time? And to me, that's what it's all about. So yeah, everything that I do is, led off with this conversation with folks, asking them before they attend my webinar. I'm asking questions, getting the answers, and then I'm closing the loop, sharing the results with them to say, thanks for responding. Here's what other people who are coming to the webinar are thinking. Here's where they are in their business. Here's the questions they think would be most interesting for me to answer. I do this before my courses. I do this before any event, is to ask questions. And I tell people who put on events, like, that is a rookie mistake to walk onto the stage, to to have that camera turned on you and not know who's there. But we do it routinely. We just I don't know. We need to know who these folks are. Rule number one in psychology, people are different. And if you just say, well, urgency just works for everybody, you're wrong. Nothing works for everybody. There's nothing. So you need to know what kind of people are there in your audience, who are there, why they're there, what would, kind of trip them, take that next nudge to buy what you have to sell, what are their pains and what's their aspirations, what's their problems. And you need to ask, but you need to ask in the right way. There's just so much survey going on and asking people these limited questions that it's just not getting. It's the right idea, but it's the wrong question. So that's what I teach, is how to ask the right questions in the right way so you can learn from your people. And that information is so rich. That is the number one. If I send this to my email list, the number one thing that people will open are those sorts of questions, because I promise them some answers. Let them know we're going to be learning from everybody that responds. If you just answer these 2 questions, I'll give you the results. And over time, people respond more and more and more because they want to know, well, who else is in the room with me? I mean, that's just a very human thing to know. Am I in the right place, or other people, do they have the same concerns and problems that I do? If you can build that in before you start doing your selling, you are miles down the road from that person with just a cold audience and has to rely on all the scarcity and high pressure and those sorts of tactics.
I think that was one of the most exciting things when I met you, Matt, was this idea of asking these questions and then telling people in the next email, hey, these are the results. These are the answers I got. It's like you said, we're all seeking some sort of community. We have, the various circles, right? Concentric circles going outward of community. But for a lot of us entrepreneurs, this is a very lonely business, if you will. I know almost all of my clients, all of my team from here to here, right? It's just this forum on a webcam. And to hear that others might be having the same problem, and it's not, 12%. Oh, that's interesting. Whereas 44% may have given a different response to that same question I answered. It tells me about me. It tells me about my position. And, oh, I never even thought that could be a response. That's interesting. So I agree. When I heard you explain this for the first time, I really got excited because I would take that any day over this, woo, 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 gotta buy now. Look at clocks ticking down now, approach. That shows that you respect and care about me versus this, like we said, the urgency, the scarcity tactics that are used. So it just is it just takes longer. It's more thoughtful, but I think in the long term, far more effective than these tactics we've been talking about. We've got about 2 minutes. We're going to wrap it up quickly. Matt and I both have somewhere to run, but we hope so far that you have found this to be an interesting discussion. We've got a few different things we talked about here that we love to hear your feedback on. Matt, anything you want to kind of close with before we end the show?
Yeah, I guess just decide, are you a short-term gain person or a long-term? If you're short gain, then, keep doing that, because that's what you get. I've talked to folks who are like, yeah, this is my number one. I'm so proud of this email. This is my one that just puts the pressure on people. I send this to them the last hour of all my sales, and it just converts like crazy. Okay, but then you got what you want. You got the win. You got the purchase. You probably got a ton of refunds to go with it, but maybe not enough refunds to offset the gains. So I'm just saying that that is going away, as it has been for years. Because we're all in on this now. We weren't all in on it 5 and 6 years ago, but I think most people are just really tired of that. They hear it all the time on newspapers and on TV and on the web, on the browsers. I mean, it's always this urgency. So we're just hit with it all day long. And if you're just doing the same thing, then you're just one in a crowd, and you won't be remembered. I don't remember those people anymore, but I do remember the people I'm still talking to. Those are the ones that didn't use urgency. I'm still focused on them. I'm still recommending them. I'm totally focused on them. And I've forgotten everybody else. So where do you want to be? Short-term gain and forgotten, or do you want to be the long-term player? That's, I think that's where it's at for me.
I love it. That was a great way to I think encapsulate everything we've talked about in that little bit you just talked about. Short-term, long-term. Which do you really want? I know which camp I'm in. Long-term, right here. Again, as always, we want to hear your comments. We want to get discussions going here. So please drop your comments below. Let us know. Are you still following some of those people that you first encountered that had used false urgency or false scarcity? Are you loyal to them, still buying their products and services, or have you moved on? And what do you think about, short-term versus long-term? So let us know. You can subscribe, hit the notifications if you're watching this on YouTube, that little bell, so that when we put a new episode up, wherever it's located here on the screen. If you're listening by podcast as well, please comment and follow us so that we can, let you know when new episodes are coming out. Matt and I are both available on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to us there. And we look forward to seeing you next week for another chat with Anita and Matt. Take care until then, folks. Bye for now.
See you then.